Thank you for visiting Past the Wire TV, the YouTube channel of PastTheWire.com.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Past the Wire TV and what we hope will be an interesting episode where we're going to try and accomplish something, or at least get a blueprint to accomplish something that, in my opinion, racing has thus far failed to do. We've got a very interesting panel of what I would call experts. Maybe we can exclude myself out of that. But we've got Jim Gazelle, regular Past the Wire contributor, a big part of our team, longtime racing fan, student of the game, likes to dabble in wagering a little bit, as I do. I'm a longtime fan, student of the game, gambler, better. Julian Brown, same thing, student of the game, around for a long time, knows the game, has his own show as well. Very active in the racing community. Bill Gadamer, an attorney who handles a lot of racing matters, amongst other things, and has also been involved in the game for a long, long time. We go back to the glory days of racing in the 70s and 80s. And Jeff Metz, who is currently a trainer in California and Arizona, who's winning a lot of races lately. Congratulations. That's, noted. Jeff is also someone who's ridden horses and rides horses. So he's got a wealth of experience from the horseman's perspective. His son is an exercise rider, so he's got a lot of vested interest in the well-being and safety aspect of the sport. So I think we have an interesting panel to go forward, talk about issues in racing that fall into a couple of different categories. What are we overreacting to? What are we missing? What's the low-hanging fruit, and how do we improve the sport and safety of it, perception of it, and attract new fans? That's the goal. I think racing has missed the boat on that. We'll talk a little bit about HISA and whether they're the answer. So we'll take a little break. We'll come back. Jim will take over and kind of run things for us. Thanks everybody for tuning in to this episode of Past the Wire TV. Who knows where it's going to take us, and we'll be back in a minute.
Frankie Dettori, legend, world-class jockey, one of the best ever to sit in the saddle, ambassador to the sport of kings. Meet Frankie during his fanfare like never before, only on Past the Wire TV.
John, thank you very much for the introduction. I feel like we've got a great mix of expertise here during this conversation. So let's dive right in. Which issue do you think racing is overreacting to and wasting efforts on? John, let's start with you. Kick us off. What do you think racing's got their blinkers on too and looking in all the wrong spots?
Well, I think I think to stay on point, I would probably say the whip or crop issue. And that's not to say that I don't think it's an important issue. I do. I just think we've overreacted to it, and I think the focus should be on educating people that the crop that we use now is a safe crop that does not cause pain to horses. I think we should educate people on how much we've done to, go in that direction and make sure that, it's a relatively safe crop, or as safe and as pain-free as it can possibly be, not abusive. And I think that the stewards, in my opinion, have always had the discretion and the authority to call in any rider on the racetrack in a race that abuses the whip or overuses the whip or does something inappropriate with the whip. So for HISA and for racing to start implementing regulations and restrictions as to number of strikes without educating people about the public about the perception of the crop, I think is a mistake. My only concern, and I don't have the expertise to weigh in on this, and maybe when Jeff speaks, he can weigh in from a horseman's perspective. But my only concern about the crop is, even if it is pain-free, okay, is encouraging a horse too much, or a horse that might have another issue going on with the crop, even with a couple of strikes with a painless crop, is that type of encouragement opening the door for a potential injury by encouraging a herd horse to try when they might want to back off without that extra encouragement. That's a concern that I have, and that's something I think racing should be addressing, as opposed to just the addressing of the crop with limiting the number of strikes and finding riders.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, and kind of gets my brain thinking. We talk a lot about the whip strikes, but to your point, the encouragement of a horse, and I'd be interested to hear Jeff's perspective, being as close to these horses every day on the racetrack and on the backstretch. Is that part of it too? That encouragement with just the whip, or when the rider has his full strength on the reins, giving it and riding into that horse. What's your perspective on both of those issues, Jeff, and where might you stand on that effort around the whips?
Yeah. So with the new whip that John's speaking about, it's it's a 360 degree, looks like a miniature little Nerf whip on the end, about a 6 to 8 inch long little Nerf 360. So it really does not cause pain on the horse. They can feel it, but it's more of a tapping your knee, kind of a, you could have the jockey hit you in the leg and you wouldn't hurt. But sometimes that noise, or the touch of the rump, or the noise of the popping, the little smacking sound. I think there's been so many times in races when the jockey said, "Oh, if I had one or two more, I think we would have won." And I think that really, it cost the owners money, it cost the bettors money, and the owners and the bettors are the two major driving forces in this. I think it's very rare that if a horse is protecting himself, he's going to ease up and protect himself. You can hit him as hard as you want, and he's not going to put forth that 100% effort. It's just, they know at the end of the race, when they're starting to get tired, they kind of ease off and they don't give 100% because they need to protect themselves. And I just feel that it doesn't matter how hard a jockey whips or pushes them, they're only going to give maximum effort of what they can. Now, in the case of the horse that's a little lazy, doesn't give its full potential, we see that in adults, in middle school kids and everything else. Sometimes they need a little nudge and a little, let's get going. Even the pros need coaches, or they sit around and they don't quite work as hard as they need to. So I think that, and one of the things that I see at the tracks where they actually have stewards that are counting the whips, HISA stewards that are counting the whips. Oh, the jockey hit 7 times, he hit 8 times. And I think when it's in the jockey's head, how many did I hit? Do I have any more left? I think that's a thing that they don't need to be worrying about. I agree with John's point. The stewards have been watching races for many, many years. And if they feel one was abusive to a horse, they hit the horse 21 times in the last 16th of a mile, that rider needs to be called in. But what they, prior to this 6-strike rule, they were doing where you could whip twice in succession, and then you had to give the horse a stride or two to respond, and then you could hit another 2. And I think that is a better step in the right direction than this 6 hits and that's it. Because you might need 1 or 2 to get them going out of the gate. Now you got 4 left. Do I use it at the 3/8, the quarter pole? Do I wait till the very last minute? And I've had a number of times where the jockey came back and he goes, "Oh, if I had 1 or 2 more, I think we would have won." So in my personal opinion, I think the whip rule is a overkill at this point because of the composition of the whip and the amount of strikes.
How big of a difference does that actually make? You mentioned a few times in there, riders saying, if I had one or two more, maybe we would have got there. Does it make that substantial of a difference where 6 strikes feels a bit limiting to you as a trainer and the riders themselves? And maybe if you had upwards of 8, 10, or even an unlimited amount, you feel like, you might be getting to the wire first. Give us a little insight into just how big of a difference you feel like that makes, if at all.
Sure. So one of the things when this whipping came in, so many jockeys were used to, the rhythm of their finish was dedicated on the whipping and the finish to the wire. 1, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, and they just had a style, switch sticks, another couple. And so now you're limiting that. Some of the jockeys, I'm not going to name names here, but some of them are very strong, powerful riders, and they're at an advantage now because of the whipping situation. Also, some softer, timid, quieter riders are maybe a little more have an advantage because you've taken away the other jockey's whipping capacities. But as far as I just think that it's not abusive or hurtful to the horses, and I think that it's really can cause the effect. John and I have had this conversation off camera and said, there's certain tracks that bettors won't play because when this first came into the rules, some tracks were on this whipping limitation, limited whipping rules prior to HISA coming involved and doing it nationally. But and there's a few states that aren't going along to this. So some of the bettors are saying, you know what, I'm going to go bet these tracks that actually didn't enforce these whipping rules, and they're going to go ahead and maybe these horses are going to run more truer to form.
Julian, let's go to you next. What's your perspective? Do you agree with John and Jeff that the whips is what has got all the wrong attention, or do you see something else that racing is erroneously focusing on at the moment?
Well, I kind of agree with them in that we probably were focusing too much on the whipping and there's other things. Optics are important. I had an interview with Gina Rarick, a American trainer in France, and she said something that's important. What people feel about racing outside the game is important. It gives them license to operate. So we do have to be cognizant of what people think about racing, even if we might think it's silly. But I do believe that it probably doesn't matter that much. I do like when they try new things, like when New Jersey tried, without whips for a season. I'm fine with trying new things. A meet without Lasix is fine. I would like to see follow-up research to see whether or not, like, let's say the buyer figures at Monmouth, did they change because they had no whips, or were they the exact same? I was trying to get that information. I would love to find out, because if we find out, for example, after a meet without whips, the horses ran the exact same speed, then maybe we should re-examine that. I think generally, I think the HISA regulations and the things that we did, a lot of it focused on doping, which is great. I'm glad to get guys like Jason Service, get them caught, because it does make the game look bad when those things happen at big events. I think our bigger issues with racing is the shortage of mares, shortage of horses, the over racing, high takeouts, the kind of thing that's going to make racing endure are the things I'm more worried about. Again, doping's terrible. If guys like Jeff Metz who are playing the game honest can't survive because the dopers are winning all the races, that's bad. But if it's not quite that bad, there are other issues that we probably should focus on as well. And I think making the game more hospitable to wagerers is more important. What are we going to do about horse shortages if we're running out of horses every year, and the number of races? We still want to have a lot of races. We want a lot of races to bet. Horsemen want events to enter. So I just think there are other issues that sometimes get lost in the shuffle. So I agree with John, but also I do think that there are other areas of focus that I think tend to get left behind.
Yeah, certainly. I think the attempt to eliminate whips at Monmouth Park, I think alongside that, them not wanting you to bring your coolers into the backyard area there. Nobody showed up and nobody bet that meet. So you saw a quick reversal of both of those issues, if you will. William,
one thing. Let me interject one thing that goes to what Julian said, and I wish I could remember where I read it so I could maybe speak to its reliability or not. But I did read something, Julian and everybody, that the statistics were pretty much the same when they ran without the whips. And also now with them running with the new, restrictions, the same, the buyers are staying the same, the Ragazins and Thoroughgraphs are staying the same, the winning favorite percentages are staying, everything is staying somewhat level with all the changes is what I've read. And again, I can't recall where I read it, so I don't know how accurate it is, but it was somewhere that, I remembered reading it, so it was probably somewhere credible. Go ahead. Back to you, Bill.
Yeah, I'd be interested to hear from the legal side if you feel like there's anything that racing is focusing on too heavily, or perhaps not even focusing on enough from your perspective.
Well, not necessarily from a legal standpoint. I have some opinions that have very few people who agree with it, but I guess this is a show for ideas. I think that the whip rule was hurt by the fact that it was the first exercise of power by HISA. So that in its own right was a problem. It's something new, and it's something that's obvious to see. And I don't necessarily agree that it costs bettors or costs owners money, because it's a zero-sum game. For every person who loses, somebody else wins. I mean, that's why disqualifications are don't cause riots at racetracks, because for everyone who's cost a placing, someone gains a placing. But a related matter, I think racing lost its way significantly when it started deviating from focus on the win bet. And this will tie into something that I'll say a little bit later. The exotic bets are fine and all, but they originally were seen as gimmicks. They've become the driving force in the game. And with that comes a focus not on the winning effort, but a focus on who finishes third or fourth or fifth. And what that results in is tired horses, being asked to exert themselves way past where they belong. I see constantly conversations about people saying that someone didn't ride a horse out for fifth because of a superfecta bet, or some bet that really should be the tail, and has become the tail that now wags the dog. When there was a day when John and I would come out of Saratoga where every bettor could remember every winner of all 9 races. I can assure you that's not the case now. When you go out afterwards, people speak about, I had a superfecta and I can't believe the 6 horse didn't hold on for fourth. And the more you make it a lottery, the further you get away from it being what it is, which is a contest for speed and getting to the wire first. And what comes with that is a whole set of dissatisfactions, whether it be effort by a rider, whether it be a tired horse. It just really shouldn't be the main focus. And I think getting back, I don't want to go on, but Jonathan and I were mutual clerks, and back in the day, I would see people bet $20 of $1 combinations. And when they walked away from the window, it was virtually impossible for them to win. I would calculate in my head what the bet was, and I would say to somebody, well, why wouldn't you bet $20 on a 4 to 5 shot if you like that horse? And the answer always came back, I'm not a $20 bettor. But of course, they put down a 20 and walked away with $21 tickets, which were almost impossible to win on. So the further you get away, I think, from the win bet, the further you get away from maximum exertion only for the main prize, the more you have these issues of tired horses being asked to go further than, persevere longer than they otherwise would. So that's a long, boring answer, but I would think that a refocus on the actual winner would serve racing well.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair point, right? I mean, every racetrack marketing you see is, X number of thousands of dollar carryover in the pick 5 or pick 6. So that's where they want you to dump your money. It's like the same game parlays in sports wagering. They're kind of like sucker bets a lot of times. It's like hitting a lottery ticket.
Right. And the pick 5 and the pick 6 bets, at least it focuses upon the winner of the race.
Sure.
When I get someone new to a racetrack, I'll ask them what they plan on spending sometimes, and they typically say, about $100. And I implore them to spend $50 on whatever nonsense they want to bet throughout the day, but to make at least one $50 win bet. And the look of shock that I get from people who consider themselves very happy to blow their $100, but would never bet $50 on one bet. It gives them the excitement during the day, whether that $50 win bet is on a 3-to-1 shot or a 10-to-1 shot, or hell, a 3-to-5 shot when they find out that they're down $30 at the end of the day. It brings a focus to the game that they otherwise wouldn't have. And as much as people like to say, gee, I was first, second, and fourth, or I bet the 5, 7, 9, and gee, it was the 6, 8, 10, I was close. They don't realize that they were close or far away. They do realize they were close or far away when they make a win bet and a horse gets beat a head or a neck or a nose. And that's I think that focus would be helped. And when we get later on, I'm proposing that maybe the win pool should be subsidized in some way to bring focus back to that.
Interesting. I love betting to win, so I'm all on board with that.
Yeah, in my opinion, I think racing is too heavily focused on the whip rules. And I think we saw that experiment at Monmouth Park when they eliminated the whips and handle was way down. And like in anything else, money talks, and they brought the whips back. And to your point, William, too, perhaps this was right out of the gate what HISA was focused on from an optics standpoint. I get that. But perhaps that attention may have been better served elsewhere, which leads us into talking about HISA. Are they good for the game? Do we need it? Or are they just kind of there? John, I know you've spoken at length about HISA and your opinion on it. Give us your thoughts one more time. Where do you fall on that debate? Is the industry going to be better off short term and then long term with a body such as HISA overseeing it as it is right now?
Well, it's a much more complicated issue than it appears to be, and it's probably a more complicated issue than I think most people on both sides of the fence realize. Okay, you've got the people that support HISA, and then you've got just as many people, maybe more, that are anti or against HISA. Okay, and I, at the end of the day, fall in support of HISA, and I'll explain why. I think that when it comes to regulating and policing itself as an industry, okay, horse racing has failed numerous times. We are a historic sport. Our history goes back well over 100 years, okay? There are racetracks over 100 years old that are still racing today, okay? We've had chances to regulate and police ourselves. We have not done it. We do not have the uniformity or the type of organization or structure with which to do it. Okay. We have uncooperative racetracks that are all for their own interests. And you can see that on any Saturday afternoon if you try and watch the races. we can't manage to stagger the post times of big stake races. They run right on top of each other. That's annoying. It's counterproductive. But more importantly, it demonstrates our lack of ability to promote our game, make it smooth, and cooperate with each other. And I'm talking about different racing jurisdictions, okay? We race in multiple states. Different states have different laws, different guidelines, different regulations, different jurisdictions. We need to come under one umbrella, okay? Now, I think California is a great example of a jurisdiction that had some problems, okay, and really tackled them and made some significant changes. And right now they're looking at a year, only a couple of years past a horrendous publicity and perception issue for the sport with a bunch of breakdowns at Santa Anita that caught national news attention, okay? Haven't had a breakdown this year at Santa Anita or last year, or whatever the stat is. Jeff may know it better than I, but tremendous strides, okay? So it can be done by a racetrack that decides to do it and make changes. But when you go national and bring in multi-states, okay, if it's not HISA, okay, it would have to be an organization like HISA that had jurisdiction like the NFL has a commissioner and they run everything. Major League Baseball, hockey, all these professional sports have somebody in charge and a ruling or governing body. We've never had that, okay? That governing ruling body should be empowered to regulate the sport, police the sport, promote the sport, and force tracks to work in certain ways together in harmony. I mean, look at Major League Baseball and some of the things that they've done to help with revenue sharing for the low market teams and that, you know, can't compete with like the New York and, you know, big city teams and, you know, revenue wise, they share revenue. You know, we have to do things like that to help the smaller tracks survive. We have to maybe race less to get more. You know, one of my betting slogans is sometimes you've got to, you know, cash less tickets to win more money. It's the same thing. So unfortunately, my answer is at the end of the day, I've got to side with HISA because they're all we got. We got nothing else. There's nobody else out there. If racing decided tomorrow that, yeah, we're going to have a commissioner and a ruling body, that's as far as we get because we'd never be able to agree on a commissioner. Even us five probably couldn't agree on it, you know? Never mind the governing body or what they would do. Huh?
I'd vote for you, John.
Nah, I wouldn't pass the background investigation. I'm out. But we can't do it on our own. So unfortunately, I'm against over, you know, governmenting something. I'm against them taking over. I think they've made some mistakes. I'm against having as many people as they have that don't have racing backgrounds. But I will tell you this. Lisa Lazarus, who is the head of HISA, was gracious enough to come on my show and do a one-on-one interview with me, okay? And I believe that her heart at the end of the day is in the right place. I believe she wants to succeed. She wants to improve the sport. And, you know, has she done things that, you know, us hardcore horse people might not agree with? Yeah, but there's a learning curve. But again, I've got to stand with HISA because we can't do it on our own. They're all we've got. We've failed. The ship has sailed, in my opinion. You know, we've had not only 3 strikes, we've had 103 strikes. And we missed every one of them.
Well, John, you know, one of the timing is everything, right? And it's hard to imagine a time in our lifetime that could be worse timing for a national effort like HISA to enter into our sport or for anything. You know, right now you have a very fervent anti-federal feeling in almost every endeavor. You know, you have Texas who has decided that it would rather shut the game down than listen to Lisa Lazarus or anyone for that matter from outside Texas. You have
Texas is tough. You've been to Texas, you don't understand that.
right, but it's not
How
only
they go.
there. It's not only there. I mean, you have an anti-federal feeling. You have people who think that, it would be better if the FAA didn't regulate planes. So what? You have a couple of planes crash every day. It's better than having the feds involved. You have the House of Representatives that is threatening to ruin the entire economy to prove that no one from Washington is going to tell them what to do. So I mean, HISA is clearly an attempt to force and to prevent the forum shopping that goes on. In the corporate world, everybody incorporates in Delaware because Delaware has the most permissive rules. In the racing world, there's only 4 really state jurisdictions that are the bulk of horse racing. It's California, Florida, Kentucky, and New York. The others matter, but numbers wise, it's just those. And you spoke about how California has cleaned its act up, and it cleaned its act up almost entirely due to political pressure from the state's governor, who said, you can clean it up or you can stop running. Florida has gone the other way. I dare say Florida is probably highly disappointed that Jason Service and Navarro got caught up in an FBI investigation. Probably if they had their druthers would welcome back with open arms. So, a federal response.
That's a pretty bold statement, but go ahead.
Well, I mean, I think right now you can say that Florida has a wild, anti-regulation bent in almost every endeavor, right? So, I mean, I think they would gladly welcome any person who was ruled off anywhere else, could, and if not Florida, there'd be other states. So that's why a federal response it's felt was necessary. I just wonder whether or not that they'll have the support to continue it. I mean, if there's an expense involved, there's also an acknowledgement that you have to give up some power. The state racing commissions are filled with people who do that for a living and like doing that for a living, or at least don't mind doing it for a living. And to pry that power away from people is not easy. And it's not an enviable task that HISA has. And I suspect they'll might die from a million small cuts. But
I'll speak about the California situation. And John, I saw the headline of the article that you were talking about, that during 2022 there were no racing fatalities at Santa Anita. So that was really big kudos. And when HISA came into play, I think a lot of the rules and regulations were kind of patterned off of what they were doing at Santa Anita, and it seemed to work. They have regulatory vets watching the horses train. They have anytime there's new horses come involved, they come and check them. So there's a lot of eyes on these horses. The whipping rules started there. The no Lasix in stakes races, no Lasix on 2-year-olds. So there were a lot of these situations, but really for the safety of the horse, like more eyes on the horses. You had to sign up for workouts and have your personal vet check the horse before they work or enter a race. So not only the trainers, the grooms, the assistants, but our veterinarian, as well as the state's veterinarians or the racetrack's veterinarians, are checking these horses multiple times. And so, things can happen hour to hour, day to day. So it really, you could see it did a 180 as far as, the horses are going to get injured here and there, and there's going to be fatalities with training and racing. Some of them are not, sometimes they're in the barn, things outside of, on the racetrack. But I think to the point you made, John, I think that what would really be nice for owners, trainers, jockeys for that matter, is a uniformity across the U.S., especially the U.S., because what's happened right now is if you're going to race in another jurisdiction, a lot of times as trainers, you have to call somebody there and say, hey, Steve, what are the rules in your state? How many days can they have bute, or if they had a joint injection, or if they had, what do they need, or what can they have? What can they use? What can we not use? Because we don't want to ship to another state, run in a race, and have a problem or have an issue. either were scratched or the post-race test comes out bad because, oh, it shouldn't have been getting this because that's not legal in our state. So if we had a commissioner that oversaw all the states, the Jockey Club's doing a good job. The papers have gone to digital. So now instead of papers getting lost and stuff like that, you can just email the papers from one racing office to the other. So it takes a click of a button and you're good to go. A big problem that we have in racing for owners, trainers, as well as jockeys and others is it would be nice if we had a national licensing situation, because right now, every time if you're racing in 5 different tracks on the East Coast, you have to get a license in 5 different states. Now they do have the National Racing Compact, but invariably what happens is as soon as you go to another state, they're like, oh, well, we don't have reciprocity with California, or, we're not, the National Racing Compact doesn't cover this state. So I think they were on the right track because you could put fingerprints in and your credit card or whatever. And so they would get you licensed in each state. You didn't have to go through all the paperwork, the fingerprints and stuff like that. I guess they're doing background checks and stuff like that. But you would think usually if something comes up, it's kind of like suspensions, whether it's a jockey or a trainer. If you get a suspension in one state, it's you can't race in any state. So you can't just like go over to the next state and say, well, I'm going to run here, because they all, take care of each other. And whether that be a financial complaint and an owner is ruled off, well, he can't just go to another state and race till he makes that right. And the same happens for jockeys. If they have a suspension, only in the case of like graded stake races where they can get an allowance, but and trainers, like if they're ruled off, or have a suspension, they can't run in any state.
I was going to say, with the HISA, even if all the regulations haven't worked perfectly, I think it is nice to have a federal body or a national body with some credibility to get some things done. I remember you get to know people's political leanings on social media because they post about their politics. I was surprised how many horse people that I thought were real conservatives were happy when HISA came in. Like, oh, the federal government's coming in. But in a way, I think that's good because, most, football, most sports have a national, NFL, Major League Baseball. They are regulated across the country, and racing is difficult because it's owned by large corporations in different states and different jurisdictions, and it's hard to get the rules standardized. I think Jeff was talking about. I remember trying to claim horses from out of state, using fake owners to get a horse and shipping them back in, or different rules in terms of jail time. You can't run a horse after you claim them in Kentucky and Maryland for 60 days. There was a lot of things I thought were kind of inefficient that could be eliminated if we had more of a national type of focus on racing. So I think over time, it would be nice if HISA or any federal type of body would have credibility and would work, because I think there are some big problems that we need to solve. And, the racetracks aren't going to work together because they're all different profit centers. They all want to try to make money. So, hopefully HISA or something like it will work out.
And one of the things that I think is a step in the right direction, as we've all alluded to, is there's going to be a learning curve when there's something new. Horse racing, even though it's been around a long time, it also comes with people that have done things the way they've done things for a long time, and change is hard in any business, let alone horse racing. So when this new HISA came to be, one of the things that I think is going to be very beneficial for them as the Horseman Advisory Board, because just as you said, John, there's a few people maybe inexperienced in horse racing that are on there. Maybe they have more of a business or legislative savvy, but that's going to be their specialty. But with the advisory board of having a few horsemen, such as some well-known trainers, as well as very respected veterinarians, I think you're going to have a lot more credibility, and you're going to go a lot farther when you have that brain power and you can come together and brainstorm some ideas. And like you said, John, it's hard to get people to agree, but if they could get a round table and say, let's all come up, let's take a vote here and what these couple of items and what we think after a few presentations have been made. And I think that will go a long way in pushing this learning curve, making this learning curve much more easier.
I agree with that. And I think that is an important stride that they made. Having a horseman's advisory board and putting qualified people on there. I would have liked to have seen a gambler or two on there, but the gamblers were kind of ignored in that whole mix. And I think, as Jeff alluded to, and I've said many times, the only people that put money into the game are bettors and owners. So I think they've got as much of a stake as anybody else, and they should, they should be heard. And that's not happening. But one thing I will say,
having applied to be on the advisory board and not being selected, I guess I'm somewhat biased. But there is a danger, Jeff, and I hear it a lot of times. Giving legal advice to people in the horse racing business is not easy, because the answer is always, we've always done this way, and we always will do it this way. And most professions, most businesses have an institutional arrogance, and racing probably has an institutional arrogance that goes back longer than most. And we've seen how many trainers who probably really didn't do anything wrong to their employees, but ran way afoul of labor laws and reporting laws and the like. And whenever you speak to them and say, this is something that needs to be done, the answer is always, well, I'd rather close up shop than do that, and that can never be done, and let them come and get me. And I think if you have too many people on the advisory board who give that information, that this can't be done, the game can't be cleaned up, the game can't be, you can't really, rely on this, you'll have no horses, I don't know if that's effective. And I'm not saying that's what the advice that the advisory board is giving HISA, but if it becomes too centric on the horseman centric, I think you have a default for the status quo, and I think that's a danger.
Yeah, I mean, the status quo is what got us here, right? And if they're not going to have the proper conversations and talking points to get us to the next 5, 10, 20 years down the line, then, what good is it ultimately? John, you raise a good point about letting the gamblers have a say in some of this. So if you were commissioner, let's say HISA leads to a nationwide governing body for horse racing, much like we see in the NFL, MLB, NHL, NBA. If you became commissioner of horse racing in the US and North America, what would be the first thing or the first couple of things that you would do in your mind that would help the game moving forward?
Well, I would do two things, and they would kind of go in connection with each other. And this will probably not be a popular first step, but again, I'm commissioner and it's my decision. So here's what I would do. I would ban private vets from racetracks. Okay, I would have all vets, either racetrack and or state employees, to have a certain number of them on the racetrack, and a centralized pharmacy on each racetrack. Okay, I would not allow any drugs of any type, any syringes of any type on the backside or the front side, but on the backside, that did not come from a centralized pharmacy that regulated everything, that knew who was getting what, when they were getting it, what they were getting it for. And it would be a racetrack vet or a state vet that was administering it, not a trainer being able to call any vet on the backside that he wants to use and or work with to do whatever they want to do. I would force trainers to go back to the old school way of being trainers, and trainers training the horses instead of the vets helping get horses to the races, which would be probably unpopular. But I think it's essential. I think that's another ship that has sailed. And we saw, if you look in the, Service and Navarro indictments, we saw some of the type of vets that have infiltrated the backside and some of the things they were administering to horses and were getting on the backside. And I would definitely, for the safety of the animals and for the integrity of the sport, do whatever I could to eliminate that. That would be priority one, with a zero tolerance policy for anybody who tried to skirt that rule in any way. And at the same time, in conjunction with that, I would implement a surveillance system that was monitored by a third party. There would be cameras in every barn, every stall, every angle. You'd know who was in there, what they were doing. Everything would be recorded. You'd be able to go back, just like I've got security cameras all around my house. If I'm out today and I go out and somebody decides to be a porch pirate and steal something, I got them on camera doing it. I got their license plate driving down the street doing it. I got everything. I'm going to find that person if I want to find them. Same type of thing. The technology to do all that kind of stuff is out there. And I think that integrity and safety go hand in hand. Safety probably comes first, but the integrity of the game, ties right in. And that would be step one. I've got a lot of things that I would do if I was in charge of racing, but that would be first day, first order of business. That's what I would do.
Yeah, a lot of that security would probably cost a heck of a lot of money. So maybe William's idea of seeding the wind pools might come into play there with these tracks all of a sudden becoming flush with cash. William, expand on that idea that you dropped a little bit earlier. If you were in charge of racing all across North America.
Well, we'll speak about seeding the wind pool just in a little bit. My suggestions are a little less dramatic than John's. I think there's two things you can do, and one I've written about, and one I haven't. One, the easiest thing is to coordinate schedules of races. I watched the Buffalo Bills game at a watch party up in Saratoga last week, and the Buffalo Bill game are running long, and someone said, "Oh my goodness, are they going to start the Giant game before this game ends?" And everyone looked at each other and said, "No, that would be unthinkable. The NFL would never be so dumb as to do that. They'll push the Giant game back until whenever the Bills game ends." That's a common sense thing. Yet we see it all the time. It's almost, with the exception of Jim Goodman at Keeneland, it seems like there's almost who does hold races. It seems like there's almost a desire to run on top of each other. I don't think there is, but there's certainly a relative indifference. So that's an easy step to take, I think, is to try to coordinate schedules, particularly on the 2 hours on Saturday where major stakes races are run. That's a no-brainer. You can coordinate schedules for 2 hours a week. I don't know why it's not done. I suspect somebody thinks it helps their handle to denigrate or interfere with other tracks. The other thing I would do is more controversial, and it taps into the NFL as well. I think at least part of the time, and it might be ambitious to do it all the time, but I think disqualification decisions should be made by a central body off-site. I think you see that pretty well now in the replay. The replay rules in professional sports or college sports has gone through a transformation where it initially was rules that were kind of cumbersome. Now, particularly in college football, they get it down pretty good. As soon as somebody sees something that a call is missed, the phone call's made, and it's not perfect, but it's pretty good. Too often you see frustrations that gamblers have are trying to decipher what it is a foul, what is not a foul, how to judge whether or not the horse lost the placing, which is kind of a sophistry in its own. I think if it wants to be considered a major sport, that they would make off-site decisions. And part of that comes from the difficulty of having to make decisions against people whom you work with and see every day. And I don't think it's anything intentional, but I think you can't help being human beings, being close to someone who makes a decision. It takes a pretty steely person to make decisions against likable or dislikable or powerful or not powerful parties. And I think a centralized stewards decisions on disqualifications, particularly for big races, would help the credibility of the game.
I like that idea, personally.
That's what they do in the NBA. They have that replay center in New Jersey that watches all the games nationwide.
Yeah, I mean, it really shouldn't be. It really shouldn't be a discussion, and we've seen people fall into it. You know, commentators, and I don't envy commentators. I mean, I guess I do envy commentators. I'd like to do it, but I don't think their job is easy. But you know, they say, oh, gee, I can't believe they disqualify somebody out of a big pick six, or they disqualify out of a grade one race. That really, even that conversation it hurts the integrity of the game. You know, really only now. I mean, only the most jaded person says things like, "Oh, well, they would never overturn something against the Celtics, or they would never overturn something against the Green Bay Packers." I think most people believe that it's made by a central body and it's made legitimately, and I'd like to see that expand to our sport.
I don't agree with that last statement, and I'll tell you why. If you pay attention to the horse racing social media crowd, okay, you'll hear every day they'll never take down Irad Ortiz, or they'll never do this, or they'll never do that, or they always rule for this guy, or they always rule for that guy, and this guy gets away with everything. This guy will get taken down for the same thing. I don't know that we'll ever keep people happy with that. I love the idea. Don't get me wrong. I'm in favor of it, and I think it's an excellent idea, and I'd love to see it happen. But I don't think you'll get people thinking that whatever they do, you'll have dissatisfied people. I mean, I see it on social media with the games. Come on, the refs are making every call for Brady. You know what I mean? I mean, or whoever the flavor of the month might be. So.
And John, I agree with that. Although I think we've all become, if you watch sports as much as most of us do, we've all become pretty well versed now with it's where the ball is when a knee hits. You know that an elbow counts, but a wrist doesn't, as being down. I think we've come a long way in understanding what the rules is. And I have to admit, I'm more confused now than ever as to what's a foul in racing.
100%. Yeah, no, I used to be, there was a time in racing when they put up the inquiry and showed the replay, you pretty much knew whether the horse was going to come down or not. Now you have no idea. And what may happen today could be totally different from what happens tomorrow. And it could be a worse foul that stands than a lesser foul that gets taken down. You just don't know. It's extremely frustrating and extremely inconsistent.
Then you throw a foul coming right out of the gate, and do you give them a stride or two? Do you give
gate fouls don't count. Gate fouls don't count at all anymore. Anything goes coming out of the gate.
And I don't know when that happened. I think that may have happened with Bayern, but now it's considered gospel that fouls out of the gate don't count. You know, I can tell you that was never the case prior to a Breeders' Cup victory by Bayern. You know, now it's accepted as gospel. And
that's true. And you know, I remember the argument about Bayern that one of the stewards, and I think and Jeff, you might know who it is. Scott somebody is one of the big stewards out there. Maybe
Scott Chaney.
Scott Chaney. Yeah, his argument was, well, you know, out of the gate, a foul, a horse has time to recover. Okay. And I thought that was a very, very, very disconnected from reality statement. And I'll tell you why. Okay. I like to use boxing or fighting as an analogy because it works. But if you're going to get in a ring with somebody, okay, and right before the opening round, okay, you get a free shot in that guy's chest and knock his wind out. and then bing, they ring for round one. You're going to win that fight 99 out of 100 times. Okay. Guy's not going to be able to get his win back. He's not going to be the same. He's not going to be able to recover if you ring that bell right away. When horses come out of the gate, bang, a bump by 1,000-pound animal. If that shakes that horse up, if that knocks the wind out of him, if he gasped a little bit, which Mike Smith did say shared belief did in that race. Okay.
Right.
You have no chance. You know what I mean? Or you certainly have at best a significantly compromised chance. So when he made that statement out of the gate, and stewards seemed to follow along that, well, out of the gate isn't that important because there's a lot of time to recover and make up for it. To me, that shows a complete disconnect. And when riders that are stewards say things like that, it's a head scratcher for me. I just don't even understand it.
Think about that statement in any other sporting context. Think about a travel early in the game and say, the guy traveled to the basket, but so what? You get 30.
It was only the first quarter. They can make up.
Think about a goal that gets kicked in a hockey game, and you say, well, you got 48 minutes left and 2 periods left to make it up. Think about a holding penalty in the first. Yeah, he held the guy, but you're gonna get the ball 14 more times. It's absurd. It really truly is.
Agreed.
Can I be king for a day?
Yeah.
So the thing, some of the problems of racing just come from the fact is we don't have enough horses for the number of races that we have. So I would first of all try to incentivize breeders to breed more horses and to more of our fillies to become broodmares. So I would try to institute, and this is king for days or pie in the sky, like a breeder's bonus at all times. So make it more profitable to breed horses. So for the life of the horse, the breeder gets a certain percentage. It doesn't have to be big, but something. Just make it easier for them to make money. So we get more horses. Another thing that we have, Colonial Downs. I live in Virginia, and when they built Colonial Downs, because of politics, not my backyard type stuff, we end up building it in a place without a veterinarian, hospital, without any kind of horse racing culture. It should have been in Northern Virginia because then it could have been part of the Maryland circuit and close to Charlestown, but it just didn't work out that way. So Colonial was a big disappointment. Well, the last few years they've had great meets, and they did that by they've had limited racing. They stockpiled simulcast money all year long, and they've had huge purses with which they have a low takeout. They did 15% on win bets, one of the lowest in the industry. So I never really liked betting Colonial Downs, but the last couple of years I've paid attention because you look at the odds board and you got horses that you want to play. That 15% means a little bit, and the purses were huge. So I also think this, by limiting the number of races and having more horses, it does help a little bit with the doping problem. One of the reasons why people dope is because of pain relief and because we have to run the horses a lot. The racing secretary calls us all the time trying to hustle our horses in the races. And so there is incentive to put horses that may not be ready to race, but you race more than you really want to. If purses are low, the owner wants to race more than they probably should because you're trying to make money. So I do think some of the doping problems may be caused by the fact that we have to race more than we want to. So maybe if we can race less and make as much or more money, maybe that would help with the doping problem as well. So I would try to really focus on the horse shortage and to really try to increase the number of horses in the game. I think that will help with some of our problems if we could do that.
Yeah, I think part of that issue too lands one thing on my list. If I was the commissioner, there's just so many opportunities for horses to get black type, and once they do that, then sometimes the owners feel like, okay, there's nothing left for us to do. They've got graded stakes on their resume. Let's send them off to the breeding shed when maybe perhaps they could still be running. So part of what I think would be wise would be to reduce the number of graded stakes races across the country. I think that would increase the field sizes, right? I mean, I'm a New York guy. How many graded stakes races did we see in 2022 with 3 horses, 4 horses, 5 horses? You know, if they had 7 or 8, that was a lot. So that would be one thing that I would look at. 15% takeout. I feel like we've been conditioned over the last couple of years to think that that's a bargain. But if you go anywhere and you go to purchase something and like, yeah, it's a 15% tax, you'd be like, that's absolutely ridiculous. So I would implement a flat 5% takeout on every single wager. That would increase the churn. When you win, you have more money to bet. I feel like that would drive a lot more handle. One of the main issues I see as a younger person, fan of the game, and somebody that has started and grown businesses myself, racing kind of suffers from that crab bucket mentality. Like, I need to have every piece of this. I can't share, right? It's like the William, like you mentioned earlier, races running on top of each other because, perhaps some racetrack executive feels like if they're squashing another track running on top of them, that, their handle is going to go up. There needs to be a heck of a lot more collaboration amongst these tracks. There is, wealth in numbers when we can all kind of work together and share in the, share in the sport. I feel like that drives more revenue when everybody's kind of working together rather than competing for different eyeballs. I think a lot of times too, this thinking that sports gambling, sports wagering, which is, continuing to grow, especially in New York, they netted almost $1 billion in tax revenue. I think that idea that sports gambling is going to somehow magically save horse racing because you're going to attract younger people, personally, I think is a little bit misguided. You might have a shared wallet on a wagering platform to make it easier to hop over to the racing menu and put in a couple of bets while you're watching the NFL playoffs or what have you. But if we're not educating people on what horse racing is and the plethora of different wagers available, you might place a win bet here and there. You might place a superfecta bet here and there, but you're not going to be a repeat customer. So I think if I was the commissioner, one of the first things I would do, I would build a educational course on how to play the races. It's a gambling game. It's a game of skill and of great skill, really. It's the ultimate puzzle. It's like, I think you need to appeal to that. I need to be better than the person that's gambling next to me because our money is populating the same pool and I want to win. So that aspect of it, that competitive nature, I think horse racing needs to lean into, along with the challenge of piecing together that puzzle, creating that fan education, right? So you get the people that go to Saratoga once, twice a summer, just for, the social aspect. They mess around, they lose a couple $100 and, then they come back, 12 months later. We need them to be playing Aqueduct, on a frozen Thursday afternoon in February. And how do we do that? By educating them to get those gambling dollars that they, would otherwise be playing on, the NFL or the NBA. And then we're just one last point in that same kind of vein. I don't think sports gambling is horse racing saving grace, but I do think there are a lot of good concepts that horse racing needs to adapt from a wagering menu that would make it more appealing to the sports gambler. I think for Saratoga, for example, you should have the ability to wager on who you think is going to win the training title, the jockey title. You should be able to wager on how many wins, over under 1.5 wins for Jose Ortiz on today's card. Same for a trainer. I feel like you should have those options available to you. I think Kentucky Derby future bets, while I would never play it this far out, I feel like it should be available all across the board. We shouldn't have these weird, goofy pools that, you can only access if you're, in person in Las Vegas or online at random times throughout the calendar. I think there are a lot of good things that the sports wagering community and the sports wagering menu could provide to horse racing. Just feel like perhaps they're working in that direction. There's a lot of red tape to get there, which I'm sure is a large part of it. But I guess I just wish a lot of these things would be moving a lot faster than they are.
I think you bring out some really, really good points. And I think if we would have started working on those issues when poker started booming and growing in the way that it did, we'd probably be a lot ahead of where we are now. But I think some key takeaways from what you said are really important for the growth of the game. One is to promote it as a skill game, which it is. And a lot of people don't know that. When you talk to the average person who's not a racing person, they think it's 100% luck. They think it's fixed, it's rigged, and it's almost like 3-card Monte. Why bother playing it? Which really isn't the truth. It is a skill game and should be promoted as such. And even when we try and do that, okay, we miss the boat. And I'll give you an example. And all of you alluded to it before. If you watch any of the racetrack feeds, okay, I watch the live feeds. I don't really watch FanDuel or TVG or whatever they're called nowadays. I watch the track feeds, but it doesn't matter which feed you're watching. They're always pushing selections and wagers, pick 4, pick 5, pick 6, okay? And they give out horribly structured tickets that almost have no chance of really yielding a profit over time, And on TVG, they do it as well. And I've spoken to some of the people that are on the shows, and even Fox Sports, does it. And some of them are clueless and don't know how to bet. Okay. And you're not going to get away from that. That's just a cold, hard fact of life. But some of them are actually pretty sharp, but they don't get to show it because the network or the presentation or the racetrack has them or wants them to give out certain types of plays with certain types of budgets structured in certain ways. It's kind of like when you watch an ESPN panel and you don't know it. You think everybody's, talking freely. They're not. They tell people before those panels, okay, you pick the Vikings, you pick the Eagles, you pick this team, you pick that team, and have a big discussion about it, So these people are kind of produced in the same way. Where, they're giving out tickets that they're not betting, would never bet, or no better than. Some of them don't have a clue, like I said. And I think that's a mistake. I think, like you alluded to, Jim, there has to be good education as to smart wagering, smart betting, skill game, and really some kind of mechanism to teach people. Not everybody's going to be good. Not everybody's going to win, but to give people a shot. And the way they do it now, if you follow along the what we put out as educational, no shot. You really have no shot to succeed. And that's a bad business model.
I guess it all starts. And Jeff, I'm sorry, I don't mean to step on your day as commissioner. But this leads a little bit into my discussion. It all starts with the win pool, and I guess this is a show, right, where where we have no risk here because we can put forth things that aren't going to be implemented and there's no blowback to us. But I've written
There's always blowback.
Oh, well, I mean, no concrete blowback anyway. But I'd like to focus on the win pool in some areas because it's an easy thing for people to understand. It's a feeling of accomplishment. We've seen in big, and I've written extensively about this, and John, I'll send it to you to take a look at. I'm proposing that you take a big race, and I've chosen the Whitney in Saratoga for 2023, and rather than increase the purse, because we've increased the purse, the purse of the Whitney has varied from 500,000 to I think $1.25 million over the last couple of years, and it hasn't really resulted in anything that fans cared about one way or another. I mean, there's a danger sometimes when the purse is too big. A real heavy hitter shows up and everybody else abandons, and you have the 4-horse field, Jim, that you spoke about, which is always problematic. And it's a coronation, but it's not particularly attractive. And what I'm proposing is that the New York Racing Association, rather than give money to increase the purse, subsidize and seed the win pool to the tune of between $250,000 and $500,000. And it's, Jeff, as a horseman, that's heresy to you that the money's going into seed a pool as opposed to a purse. But I think it would pay for itself in additional handle. I think you could proverbially have the race that's a Dutch book where you could bet everybody to win and still come out with a profit. And that, of course, would only last until people caught on. But I think it would propel handle, Jim, as you spoke to the point where they'd get that money back. And they certainly would get it back in the form of free advertising, because would probably be the only thing that's been done differently in the game in 200 years. So I think it would take probably some permission from the New York State Gaming Commission, but it's hard to imagine why they would object to that. And I think it would be clearly that the justification for it would be winning a race like the Whitney. The winner matters. If you should pick the winner in that race, whether it be a favorite or a long shot, you should be rewarded, and you should be rewarded with literally a negative takeout until, of course, the betting rose so much that it was no longer a negative takeout, and then in that case, everybody wins. It's not needed for Breeders' Cup races. It's not needed for the Triple Crown races, but it's something that would make itself stand out. And I think the thrill of a winner is something that too few people get to, or thrill of an actual tight loss is something that too few casual race goers get to experience. And so it's just, it's probably getting no traction, but it's something I'd like to see rather than just the constant throwing money at purses. And Julian, to your point,
it's a good idea. I like it. I think it's a good idea. And they seed pick six pools all the time, and it's gotten to the point now where when they guarantee a certain number in the pick six, usually they don't have to put up any money because it usually exceeds what the guarantee is anyway.
Right, so that's a guarantee, but that's not exactly a seed. The seed is really what we see as far as a carryover. A carryover is an actual seed. And Julian, to your point, I mean, I think seeding it by a fixed sum holds out the possibility that it could be a net positive for the racetrack, because you put in 400,000 and it makes the seeds grow, right? To use the analogy, but the seed of 400,000 might grow the win pool to be 2 million instead of the 600,000 you would expect it to be. So it's just an idea, trying to do something revolutionary, and I don't know if it'll get any traction, but I draw to your point. I think sometimes it's too complex, the suggestion to people to try to pick 4 winners in a row.
It's kind of like Jim was saying, some of those bets that you could have on how many wins the jockey's going to have, like you could have those bets, different things that how many wins trainers got. One of the top trainers there has 7 horses running that day. What's the over or under? Is he going to win 3? Is he going to win 4? Whatever it may be. And also, you could put some tracks together. Like Julian said, they got a track in Virginia, very close to Maryland. Maybe they could work together and say, hey, we're going to have a rolling double, these 2 races and these 2 races. You see it in California with the late double going back and forth. But you could even go, if you said, hey, we're having a little horse shortage here, we're having trouble filling races, you know what? We're going to have 6 races on our card. We're going to have 6 races on this other track's card. And we're going to put these 12 races together and have some pick 4s, which are 2 here and 2 there. We're going to have some rolling doubles, back and forth, back and forth. And now you're getting a few more bets, but yet using the same horse population that you have. So you're not trying to fill more races just to get more bets. Some of the bets Jim spoke about, some of these combining tracks. And if you see, like William said, if you had a chance where you have 2 big stakes races in California, 2 big stakes races in New York, and 2 big stakes races in Florida, you could have a national pick 6. And now this pool is they might all have to share, or they're betting on their track or this track. And one last point I'll leave with on this topic is when Jim said you bring in the new people and you teach them how to bet. How about if the tracks were to give them a voucher and say, hey, you walk through the door, here's $20 voucher. It's no different than free drinks in Vegas or a betting voucher at the Indian casinos. They got to bet it. In order to use this ticket, you can't cash it for cash, but you can bet it. So now they go to the window, they bet, they learn how to bet. And a lot of the tellers, if they're not busy, they'll teach them. But some tracks, and one that I go to, is they actually have a little booth where the people can come up and ask, what's an exacta? What's a daily double? What's a pick 3? Is that the first 3 horses or 3? They don't know what it is. And so you teach them this. So not only do they have little horse racing 101, Emerald Downs, Canterbury, a couple tracks that come to mind, that actually have little courses. You can come in 30 minutes before the races, have a little moderator, and they tell you, here's how you bet. Here's a few horses we like today, whatever. But what a win, place, and show is. Somebody bets show, and the horse runs second, so they throw their ticket away. I bet him to run third, and they didn't know, first, second, or what they get paid on. And then not only teaching them how to bet, but then also explaining to them, like the people that only came one time in Saratoga, you can get this app on your phone, and maybe you guys are at a party one day, and you guys can go on here and you can bet. And next thing you know, they're betting every weekend on their phone. They think, I thought you could only bet if you come to the track. That's why we only come once a year. And little by little, you can get some fans. But I think, bringing in the young people, explaining to the new people so they don't feel intimidated and then just walk away.
We're kind of transitioning into how do we get new bettors into the game? Because we talked about types of bets. And I think, I am a win better myself, but a lot of people they love combinations. They love the numbers. And I don't want to take that away from them, even though, I'm a win better. But I think one of the problems we have with new bettors is it's very hard to explain horse racing to a novice. It's a long learning curve. And even like John and I have talked horse racing a lot of times, John Stetton, and we don't agree on anything in terms of how to handicap a race, but we both know the other is a good handicapper. It's just so hard to teach the game because it's a game of opinions. There are some truths in the game. But at the end of the day, everyone handicaps a little bit differently, and it's hard to say one person's right, one person's wrong. But nevertheless, I don't think the education of the game is going to come. I got some friends that always complain about the TVG folks or the folks on the track feeds. They waste a lot of time. They don't help with the handicapping. They don't put tickets together in a proper way. And to me, their main goal has to be to entertain because they're getting a lot of repeat customers that don't want to be handicapping one-on-one every day. And so it's probably easier for them just to entertain us. But we do have to find a way to train people, to teach people. I think, for example, John has a lot of good podcasts that do this and a lot of material, but we do need like a really high level set of classes or television shows. Maybe they can air during Derby Day or Breeders' Cup Day, maybe on network, maybe a half-hour show about it, like a 10-part series with the greatest thinkers of the game, like Andy Byer and guys like that. And because the game is really hard to teach, but we do have to make a commitment to teach people. And we are going to catch some people. We are going to reach some. It's hard to reach those people because horse racing is one of those games where some people they love it, and others are never get into it or never interested by the puzzle. But there are some that will. Once you're exposed to the puzzle, I think we're talking about the competitiveness, about beating the other guy because it's pari-mutuel. I think we can get some folks, but we do have to educate them. I just think it is very difficult to educate people on how to handicap. it's a very tough thing because, I've been doing it for 30 years and every day I wonder, am I on the right track? And it's just a very tough game to teach.
I think you could also, how you have these handicapping contests for your top level handicappers. Well, I think you could have a newcomers handicapping contest where they can win prizes by practicing, and just different creative ideas we can come up with to try and help people learn and kind of people in a, work together and teach them, like you said. So that's just, you got some good ideas there, Julian.
Yeah, and one more thing, and thanks. One more thing I would say about that is Maury Wolf. There was a great podcast by Marshall Graham. I guess he's an economics professor at Rhodes College in Tennessee. He teaches a class in the economics of racing, I guess. And he talked to Maury Wolf, one of the guys I used to hang out at the track years ago. And Maury's an economist. And he said like the sweet spot for takeout is 12%. That's where you're going to get the racetracks will get the most revenue without discouraging on the amount of betting. But I do think we have to give folks a greater chance to win. 5% would be great. But we do need to knock those takeouts down where, I know John's talked about how tough it is to win now. I think probably we all feel that way. But if it's 12%, we all have a greater chance. Maybe it's less rebates, which I love, but more towards low takeout for everybody.
I mean, when it's all said and done, right? Complexity just harms the joy of the game. And I say that because March Madness, right, is one of the more popular things in this country. You talk about people literally having elective surgery 2 days before the day of March Madness so they can make sure they're home recovering when they can watch TV all day from morning till night. There's people who follow college basketball, the way we follow horse racing. Yet it's almost impossible for anybody to have a perfect bracket. So much so that I guess they give away $1 billion prize, that if anybody ever does it. And it becomes clearly if that's ever hit by anyone, that'll be hit by somebody completely random, much like a lottery. So the more complex we make the bets, the more random it is, the less it's part of the joy of discovering a puzzle, and the less it is about knowledge. And I think you have to kind of get. I think that the people who promote racing would be best off giving up the old adages. I mean, there are some adages that are 100 years old that kind of work. Long price in a short field, short price in a long field. Don't bet a horse to do something he's never done, a short price he's never done before, and that requires self-discipline. I mean, I've violated all those rules pretty much on a daily basis. I've heard those adages, but every time it proves true. And rather than actually giving out selections, they might be best saying that. And I think Andy Byer does a pretty good job about that, saying that this comes down to this race, whether or not you want to take a shot on a horse that's only run once and you think he's head and shoulders better than anyone, or you want to think he's vulnerable, and that's different than making a selection. So those adages, I think should probably be put forth more more forcefully than actual selection in a race.
I like how the idea is to get new gamblers and new fans into the game. Pleasantly surprised that nobody mentioned concerts at the track.
Yeah, they did have that at Del Mar on Fridays. They had a 4:00 post, and so it kind of led into an evening concert, and then it can lead to its own issues. From what I saw from a horseman's side, the people came for about the last race, but they were really there for the concert. They really weren't there for the races, and right. They were there for the drinking and the concert. So.
They did it at Gulfstream, and it was probably as big a disaster as I've ever seen. Okay, it's comical. It really is. I will say that when they had Casey and the Sunshine Band there, I walked away from the racetrack and I was dancing in the aisle. And having fun to the old 1970s Casey and the Sunshine Band songs. But that was a rarity. What used to happen is they would come in and they would have these concerts during the day on a Saturday. The music was so loud that trainers were complaining. And one trainer comes to mind who's still training today, John Kimmel, who is also a veterinarian. He doesn't practice anymore, but he's a veterinarian. And he was spooking his horses. He was going crazy. He was like, the music is too loud. It's spooking my horses. What are you guys doing? This is insanity. I can't get my horses calm in the paddock. And they did have the concerts very close to the paddock, and you could hear them.
New York did that so many years ago when we were back there. And I remember one time going in and I was with my father, God bless him. And we walked in and Dave Mason was at the height of his popularity, and Dave Mason was going to play in the Belmont backyard. And I said to my father, they're going to have a huge crowd here today. Cause I was 18 and I knew Dave Mason was quite popular. And my father had one of the fellows who was in security and one of the executives says, my son says there's a lot of people going to be here today. It's going to be a big crowd. And they looked over at me and they joked. It was all good natured, but they joked and said, we've never heard of him. To which the answer was, well, wait and see, and by the end of the day, I think they wound up canceling races one day when Hot Tuna played there. But the Dave Mason concert, they were actually literally the backyard of Belmont was overrun with people. They couldn't handle it.
Well, here was the best about the Gulfstream thing, okay? They decided then to give out free vouchers to everybody who came to the concert to get them to go bet. So when you came in, you got a random voucher. Could be $2, could be $5, could be $10. And the people were supposed to go bet with the vouchers, okay? You want to know what happened? All right? They didn't bet. They came for the free concert. They partied, they drank, they watched the music. And after the concert was over and the races were over, you'd have some of the hardcore racetrack guys. And I knew who they were. It was a bunch of guys that used to go around the concert area. And you know what they did? They picked up all the vouchers because they were all on the floor. Everybody was throwing them away, and they would pick them up and they'd be saying, look, I got $50 in vouchers. I got $60 in vouchers. I got 20, like the old time stoopers. You remember, Bill, the old time ticket stoopers that used to wait for a disqualification and they would pick up tickets off the floor because people would throw them away before they were official. Same thing. They were throwing the vouchers away. They weren't even betting with the free vouchers. So the concert thing has been tried. Never worked. I mean, people want to go to a concert. They want to go to a concert.
Delmore does a good job of having concerts, and it's part of the racetrack experience. And a night at Delmore is just or afternoon at Delmore is a fun afternoon capped off by a concert. When they do that in Maryland, there's no interchange between the concert folks and the horse racing. I mean, they're on different planes, and they're out there partying and getting drunk, and the people who are watching the races are doing that. So it doesn't seem to work very well in Maryland, except for it is a good use of space. We have a big infield, so at least it's being used.
I've seen a few tracks where it's not a concert per se, but they do have like a little band or music, and they'll play like before the horses come out to the track. They're kind of separate from the paddock area, and so they'll play for the crowd. But when the horses come to the post parade, then they go ahead and shut it down. So a couple of those things have kind of helped the vibe at the track and the races, but it wouldn't be a concert per se.
It depends. See, I'm against it. I'll weigh in. The year that they opened up, Jim, you'll probably know, Bill, you might know, that new area at Saratoga, all the way on the far turn, I think they call it the stretch.
Yeah. In the grandstand. Yeah. It's only a couple of years old.
Right. Okay. First year that they opened that up, I was going up for a couple of weeks. I think I went up for 2 weeks, and I bought a little box there for the whole 2 weeks. I said, you know what? This year I'm going to stay away from everybody. I'm going to sit over there because when I go to the track, I like to focus. I'm gambling. I'm not there to socialize. I don't want to talk to people. I don't want anybody asking me who I like. I don't want to ask anybody who they like. I like to look at the horse in the paddock and sit at my table, and that's it. So I figured this looks like the perfect spot for me. And I love watching races from the top of the stretch with that view. Okay, love it. Okay, so I'm like, this is heaven. And I went and I loved my little table. I had a little TV there. I said, this is going to be fantastic. And it was until the last race. Because what they did was, okay, they chased me away without intending to. The last race every day, they would open up the bar area a little differently and put a little like stage there. And they had a band. And the band would play real loud. And people would gather at the bar and they'd be drinking and partying and they would be 10 feet behind me, and I couldn't concentrate. I couldn't even watch the last race from up there. I'm like, this is ridiculous. I used to have to go, leave the table that I bought, in the box that I bought, and go away for the last race because that stupid band was playing behind my back. It was either that or you know,
Well,
they've
come to the conclusion that a long race day is good because it gets handle from different parts of the country. So a Saratoga race day is now 9 hours long, you know, and I say that without much exaggeration. I mean, it may not be 9, but it's certainly more than 7, you know. So if you're going to have people there for 7 or 8 hours, you have to provide them food, drink, entertainment, medical care. I mean, almost everything, you know. It's become quite the distraction from racing. I wonder whether a shorter card, you know, a 4.5 hour card could be devoted to racing and keep people's interest. But I can tell you, John, it's kind of a constant yin and yang with it's not an easy task for racetrack operators. If you're going to ask people to be there for 9 hours, you have to provide some, and especially with racing being a game of all different ages. I mean, the demographics run older for true racing fans, but you still need younger fans to become older racing fans. It's I don't envy the task that they have on trying to figure out how to keep people fed and entertained and not inebriated for that long period of time. And what happens is people go, other than me and a few others, people go for part of the card, which takes away again from the cohesion of a race day. You know, there used to be a day when you knew all 9 winners. Now it's kind of hard to know all 14 winners on Whitney Day and be there for all 14 races.
See, and it's such a different dynamic because I love to compare racing to poker. Okay, I grew up dealing cards in poker clubs in Brooklyn. Okay. You know, we used to call them Las Vegas nights, and you'd have guys that would sit and play poker, and I not only did I deal, but I played. And you'd have guys that would sit for 12, 14, 18 hours straight, okay, and play poker, which is a skill game, and to keep your sharpness for that amount of time is tough. And I can say this with 100% certainty. If 6 or 8 hours into one of those games, you would have had a couple of people come in there and start playing music 10 feet from behind that table, somebody had gotten shot, okay? Without a doubt. Shot, no warning shot. It would happen one time. So they do it. Poker players do it. I mean, I could sit down at a poker table tired and start playing and get focused, and I can go on a 12-hour, 14-hour.
Yeah, but those players weren't asked to bring their families and their friends and new people with them. I don't think they were welcome either, right? So if you showed up to play poker and you brought 7 other people who weren't interested, they might get shot too.
You went by yourself, and I come from such a dysfunctional family that my mom was there because she used to play. But that's a whole other story.
Well, at least you have the sunglasses already, John. You can just wear those to the poker game.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know a lot of the tracks sometimes they try to have family days, and they'll have food trucks and little events and carnival situations where the kids can come and either pony rides or little carnival games that are not too intrusive to the racehorses, but it gives them a chance to bring the kids and give them something to do. Like you said, like, hey, you know, we'll watch the few races and then we're going to go over here, go to the little area and have kids area and have some fun. And then we're going to go back, watch some more races and stuff like that. So that's one thing that I think a lot of tracks are trying to do, try to, you know, get the families involved, bring the young kids out so they can experience the races. And then a few years later, it's like, oh, I remember coming to the races with my dad, you know, and they enjoyed it or whatever it may be. But, so I think we got some strides to make and some different things to try, but between
Delaware Park does that great, Jeff. They have Delaware Park. They have a moon bounce. When you walk into the track, you have a moon bounce. You have a volleyball pit. There's a barbecue pit there as well. It's a great environment. It's like a big park. The paddock is beautiful, and it's one of those things. Even if those folks aren't necessarily playing the races, and they do sometimes, when you walk out of the track, it makes you feel like you weren't just at a racetrack all day. You were at more of a park or a place where human beings are doing other things besides betting the horses. So I used to love going to Delaware Park just because of that reason.
Let's dive into the last two topics here. Overages of legal medicines. Would you guys consider that cheating? And should it be treated the same as using illegal medicines or substances? Or do you see kind of no real glaring issues with overages of legal medicines? I guess as somebody who's not well versed in the drug and veterinarian side of the horse world, I guess my main question would be, why is there a limit, right? What happens when you cross that limit on a legal substance otherwise? And, Jeff, you're a trainer. You probably have a great deal of experience in this regard. So I'll lob that question to you to get us started. What happens when you cross that threshold, and is it a big deal? Does it make a big difference?
Obviously they have the therapeutic levels in place and what they consider to be the limit that they want to have on different medications that are approved, therapeutic medications that are approved for racing. And they will put out a guideline of 24, 48, 72-hour withdrawal time, some medications 5 days, some 7, some 14 days. So they'll give out a recommendation, like I stated earlier, that, if you're going into somebody else's territory, you want to say, hey, what's the rules on bute? What's the rules on whatever the situation may be? So when you get to the point of should an overage, I think an overage definitely should be a foul and penalized. But I also think horses metabolize differently. So sometimes they might have gotten it a little closer than they should have. Maybe the barn, I won't say groom, assistant, whatever, but maybe they fed them something or the buckets got switched. There's a lot of reasons why it could happen. But so I think that it happens. I don't think it's necessarily cheating or doping. I don't think it's along those lines or that connotation. But I think it happens. But when it consistently happens, I think there should be like a tiered system where, okay, there was an overage. If you don't have any in 30 days, but then if you've had 3 in 30 days, that's just too many, 60 days, 90 days, whatever the tiered system may be. That's where I think that therapeutic legal medication and an overage for such, it can happen due to metabolization with the horses in their system, because they're all individual, different sizes, whether they got it intravenously or they got it in their feed, whatever it may be. So in that scenario, I don't think that it's, but you can abuse that as well and say, oh, well, this, that, and the other. But after a while, and we've seen it in news, social media, and everything else, like, things happen. And I run a lot of horses. And so luckily we haven't had many of those. We've had a few, but not many for the big amounts of horses I race every year. But there's other barns with even bigger than me that, you said, oh, I've heard it too many times. It's this, it's that, it's this, it's that. So sometimes you start to hear like, hey, this guy's cheating. This is just happening too much. And that's where I think maybe kind of that tiered system could come into play.
I definitely think it's not the same as some of the things we read that I don't want to pile on service, but I think when as Jeff was saying, these things can happen. A lot of the medication enables the horses to run often, and again, the racing secretary is hustling you in races, and they need you to fill out the fields in a particular day. So, there is pressure to run horses. And I think sometimes it happens. I definitely think if it happens more than often, you should pay a stiffer penalty, but I don't think it should be treated the same as these prohibited products.
Right. I mean, on one end of the spectrum, you have the hay, oats, and water contingent, people who say, and it's hard to imagine. It's hard to imagine any endeavor that involves medicine or fitness or sport that's the same as it was 125 years ago. So, so that's not realistic, and it may not even be humane to the animals themselves to run them free of any therapeutic medication if they need something. And then there's the clear feeling that we have of performance enhancing drugs, which I think most of us think we recognize, a little bit like the Supreme Court case that said, I can't define obscenity, but I know it when I see it. And now you have people who actually pled guilty to taking medication, administering medication simply for the performing enhancing nature, not the therapeutic nature of it. So it's no longer speculation; it's fact, and it happened. I frankly don't know how you distinguish between the two. I mean, I think even with overages and testing and certified results, the legal system finds it difficult to suspend or catch people who are taking advantage. So without testing, I don't know how you do it. To be honest with you, it's really a conundrum. It's probably it's too bad that owners continue to go back to people who've had problems. Jeff, it must be frustrating to you that no matter how many problems certain trainers have, people keep flocked to them in spite of, or maybe because of, the problems that they've had. I don't. Again, the regulators are probably ill-equipped to take away someone's livelihood on something other than an actual factual test. So I don't really know. I don't really know where you go with it. I mean, it does seem that sometimes it seems like when they suspend people on overages, it's just a way of showing they're paying attention without really paying attention. I don't know if that's the case, but sometimes it seems that way, and I can see how it can be frustrating to honest horsemen.
I know a lot of suspensions, you'll see that, whether it be 30 days or 60 days, a lot of times they'll reduce it to half, but the other half is still there if they were to get a violation within the next 365 days. So, but, there's that fine line where they have to do something. They can't just sweep everything under the rug.
Go ahead, John, weigh in here.
I think that there's definitely a difference in legal therapeutic medications as opposed to illegal medications or substances, or frog venom or cobra venom or whatever that monkey, whatever SP monkey, this, that, whatever that Service and Navarro were using. I mean, yeah, there's a big difference in that and getting an overage of a legal therapeutic medication. We do know scientific fact that horses metabolize differently, and you could be playing by the rules and giving a horse something that's allowed at the right dosage and within the right withdrawal time and still get a positive just because the horse metabolizes different. So is that cheating per se? No, it's wrong. It's got to be policed. It's got to be punished and regulated, and it has to be testing, and it has to be watched, and there should be ramifications. But is it, in my opinion, cheating? No. I think cheating is when, unless it's a habitual thing where a guy's using something that helps horses off-label or excessively and keeps coming up positive. You can't use the therapeutic excuse 3 times a month. So is it cheating? No. In most cases, no. I think it's a problem that has to be regulated and addressed. And we need better rules and more understanding and better guidelines in regard to the legal therapeutic meds. The illegal ones, or the off-label ones, which is for those who may not know, is that's using a drug for something that it's not intended to treat. Okay, it's using a drug that's intended for something else. So it's called off-label. Or using some concoction that you're buying from some crazy veterinarian or somebody that's making something that's, not going to, show up positive, that's performance enhancing. That's cheating. Okay. That's something that there should be zero tolerance for. And I think that the proper way to police that, and again, this is not a popular opinion with some, and it did happen in the Service and Navarro case, but I think when you do that, okay, and you're altering or attempting to alter the outcome of a sporting event that's wagered upon, that's criminal. Okay. I think that calling somebody in that's given an injection of some illegal unknown substance they bought from some veterinarian, okay, that's criminal. That's something that I don't even think the racetracks should address. They should ban that person, never mind suspend. Zero tolerance, ban, you're out of the game. Goodbye, good riddance, and it should be referred to the state attorney or whatever the local prosecutor, whoever the local prosecutor is, or even a federal prosecutor if it falls under federal guidelines because of the multi-states and whatnot. But that to me is criminal. That goes over the line. So legal therapeutic medications, no. I don't think that's cheating. I think it needs to be regulated, and we need better guidelines and better enforcement of those guidelines. And maybe HISA will help with that. But going beyond that and going into the other area, like we discussed with Service and Navarro and others who haven't been caught, because if you think those are the only two that did that or are doing that, good luck with that thought. I don't believe that for a second. So I think that's something that is cheating, is criminal, and should be dealt with, not on the racing slap on the wrist suspension level. I think that should be dealt with on a criminal level, and then you'll start to get some people's attention. There were big rumors going around after the Service and Navarro indictments that, there were going to be more, and there's more coming, and there's more in the pipeline, and that never happened. Okay. I know the wheels of justice turn slow. Maybe they'll still happen, but there's a good chance that the federal government said, hey, we started the ball rolling. We showed you what needs to be done. Now you got HISA. We've got bigger, more serious crimes to worry about than cheating horse trainers. And I don't know that we're getting the kind of attention and scrutiny we need and that this game needs to properly police itself. So, to apples and oranges, both wrong. Both need to be addressed. Both need to be eradicated from the sport as much as possible. But no, I don't think they're the same. And like I said, I think that the latter is a very serious problem that there needs to be zero tolerance for and dealt with in the harshest way possible.
The only problem with harsh treatment, and John, I do agree with you, that it does sometimes, if the punishment is too harsh, then sometimes we're afraid to implement it. When Lance Armstrong was cheating in the Tour de France, I think most of the people that are cycling fans and involved in the sport, we actually knew it. But the sanction was so harsh that it would have destroyed cycling to ever impose the sanction. So I think we kind of turned a blind eye to it for a while, and finally it all kind of came crumbling down. So sometimes, a consistent punishment, it doesn't have to be a death penalty, but sometimes as long as you're consistent and you give people a chance to prove their innocence, to fight for their innocence, I think it's fine. I don't think it has to necessarily be the death penalty, because I think sometimes if that's the case, we're afraid to issue the punishment or to levy the punishment.
Well, that's certainly the case. The stronger the punishment, the stronger people fight back. And the more your case has to be airtight, which in this instance it's often not. Julian, to your point there, I mean, one would think the easiest race to have cheated in this year would have been this year's Kentucky Derby. The state of Kentucky, Churchill Downs, the horse racing game simply could not have survived a third year in a row with a controversy. So, a cynic says, "Oh my God, everyone's watching." More of a cynic like myself says, this is the time you can get away with anything you want, because they're not going to burn the whole game down over whatever it is that you do. And that's, John, the case in business circles. A lot of times the safest place to engage in misconduct is right after the feds have cleaned things out, because the feds have moved on. And you see that a lot in antitrust violations. You see the airlines get involved in antitrust. You see the shipping companies get involved. And as soon as the investigation's over and a handful of people go to jail, that they don't come back. So yeah, it's Julian, I agree with you. It's a problem. It's too bad that people seem to think any win is a good win. And I guess horse racing, like everywhere else in society now, values winning over everything. That there used to be a sense of pride. I mean, the real old line stables didn't even want to win with anybody they hadn't bred themselves.
That's right.
I mean, right? And they wouldn't allow.
And certainly didn't want any partners.
Right, and they wouldn't allow a horse that they had bred themselves to win for somebody else. They'd retire them rather than sell them, or rather than run them in claiming races, because there was a certain pride about how difficult it is to win. Unfortunately now, and it's not just racing; it's everywhere. Winning trumps all, and I guess as long as and it's not really about money per se, because a lot of these people engaging this have more money to live than they would ever really need. That's maybe the most disappointing. I mean, the thing that I liked most about getting involved in racing when I was younger was there was a feeling where the rest of the world people who had power might take advantage. That wasn't the case at the racetrack. I mean, there were the old line stables. They may have been seething inside, but they would congratulate upstarts who won, and they would, winning fairly was really all that mattered. I don't know how you get that back. Maybe you can't, but
I think this is a good place to wrap this up. We've gone on for a while. Let's wrap it up with this. Does anybody have a question or something that they want to bring out that maybe we didn't hit on, or a question for the panel that they think is important or want to address? Because I think we covered a big array of topics and hit on a lot of issues, and I think we all weighed in with some good ideas, some that'll be difficult to implement, obviously, but anybody have anything that they want to add, or any question for the panel that they want to, pick our brains on, or see what we think?
I've got one. How to handle the owner when your trainer is suspended. So if it's Baffert, or if it's someone else's who has got caught doping, and if they're able to easily just assign their assistant trainer to the horses, or just ship them to Kentucky to another jurisdiction and run them with someone else there. How should we handle that when the owner's trainer is involved in the doping? Does it have any effect on the owner himself if he wasn't proven to be part of it?
I think from what I've seen, luckily I haven't been in that situation, but what I've seen is, certain, whatever the number of months is, if it's a certain number of months, you can't have your saddle towel, your equipment, your logo on your saddle pad. You can't have that. It has to be somebody else that wasn't working for you, and they have to train the horses and so forth. But some of the shorter ones that are 15 days, 30 days, a lot of times they're in the assistant's name and they just roll on. But as far as what does the owner do, I think that's up to the owners. I mean, I've seen in certain cases where the owners were a little upset and they felt disjointed, so they moved and they brought their horses somewhere else. Some were very loyal, and maybe they spoke to their trainer and they said, we had a barn issue, like this horse got this medication, it wasn't supposed to. We did a split sample, it still came back in the horse's system. And so we just, honestly made a mistake, and we have to do the crime. We do the time. So in that instance, I think it's the owner trainer relationship again. So if you're asking what happens to them, I think it's up to their decision what they want to do. As far as what does happen from what I've seen, I'd say about 25% move their horses because they're a little upset, and 75% stay pretty loyal and they stay with their trainer.
Julian,
Ask him more.
I think you were getting at more owner accountability.
That's what I mean. If you're the kind of owner that only hires the guys that get these positive, and you keep going from one.
Okay, now I see what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So I think this goes to what William was saying earlier. If guys are cheating, doping, whatever, they're winning, and then they're attracting the people in the business. And I think it goes back to the owners want to win. They really don't care what happened. If they're winning and making money, they're going to go with Lance Armstrong because he's winning every time. So that's what unfortunately that's what we've come to. I mean, look at 1 year you win a Super Bowl or NBA championship, and the next year you don't have a winning season, you're out as the coach. And I think it's the same with the trainers. It's like, if you're not winning, we're going to try somebody else because it's just not working out with you. So, but as far as the owner accountability, I don't see it. It's the owners aren't held accountable. Even if their horse tests positive for the thing, it's always 100% trainer responsibility. Even if the groom or the assistant or the veterinarian, maybe the veterinarian drew up the wrong bottle by mistake, but it's the trainer's responsibility because they gave it was your horse and your care and custody.
But Jeff, when you're talking about
let me share something on this about HISA. Okay. And I think they deserve a little bit of credit here, okay? And they took a lot of flack on this on social media from a lot of owners. One of the rules that they implemented about the whips actually penalized owners, okay, and disqualified owners from purse money for too many strikes. And a lot of owners are like, hey, that's not on me. You can't do that. That's not fair. And when Lisa was on the show, we talked about the fact that, hey, yes, some rules are going to be changed and amended as we go and we learn. And I brought that one up because there was a lot of flack about it. And to her credit, she was like, no, that's not one that we're going to change. We want to hold owners accountable when we can. And we implemented that rule for a reason. And the reason was we did a lot of investigation and we did a lot of research, and we found out that there were a lot of wealthy owners telling riders, don't worry about how many times you hit the horse. Win the race, I'll pay the fine. Don't worry about it. So they had to go outside the box and say, you know what? No, that's not going to work. Okay? Because if he uses the whip too much and wins the race, you're not going to get the win and you're not going to get the purse. You still want to pay the fine. All of a sudden, that big shot that's talking about, yeah, I'll pay the fine, says, no, I don't want to pay the fine. So there was a rhyme and reason to what they did, and it was towards exactly what you're saying, owner accountability.
Right. So Julian, I've done a lot of work on this. And Jeff, what you're speaking about is when a horse is disqualified for an overage by a racing commission or a racing authority. The purse is redistributed. That's pretty much automatic. You see it all the time. A horse has been disqualified, the purse has been redistributed. The Navarro and Service case, and I did do a lot of work on this. No racing jurisdiction, no racing authority got involved in that. That was purely the feds. That grew out of a different enforcement mechanism, so to speak. When they speak about $50 million worth of purses that these trainers won, and it was roughly split equally over the years between Navarro and Service and lesser amounts from the other people, that the vast majority of that money went to the owners. There is absolutely legal liability for them to give that money back if they were sued. They hired an agent committed criminal activities for their benefit. They benefited by it. There's no question in my mind that legally those owners would have to give that money back to people who ran behind them in those races. The problem comes in two instances. One, I worked on a class action suit of this to represent everyone at once. And frankly, $50 million is not enough for a class action suit. Most class action suits are more expensive because this case would be, it was in 7 or 8 different jurisdictions. They pled guilty to some horses and not others. But the bigger part was finding an owner who was willing to sue another owner. Because again, as we speak about this is largely a social event for most people. It's not what they do for their primary business. They like to be welcome at the racetrack. They don't like to make enemies of other owners. And there is behind the scenes this kind of feeling of, winning is everything you want. I'm not going to sue you for beating me. And, so that's really where it is. I have no doubt that if you had a disgruntled owner who ran behind Navarro and or Service in one of the races where they pled guilty to using performing enhancing drugs, that you could convince a court and a jury to redistribute the money. Now, it's a shame that the racing commissions have not decided to do it themselves. They should have. They may yet when it's all said and done. But it's probably something if they were true to their calling, they would immediately do right now and disqualify every Service winner in those years and every Navarro winner and redistribute the purse.
Does a bettor who can prove he lost, through his ADW, can prove he lost to a Service or Navarro horse that they pled guilty to, does he have any legal recourse against anybody?
Generally not, and it's because
the bettors always get it, man.
Well, one of the question is the people who benefited by it, unless it was Navarro or Service themselves betting their own horses, which I guess is a different story. Really didn't commit malfeasance here, right? I mean, if you bet a horse who ran second to a Service horse, you may have been a good handicapper, but the guy who bet the Service horse didn't take advantage of you. So that's part of it. But more importantly, gambling being such a regulated activity, it's all built in that the purse money distribution, the official winner of the race, is all divorced completely from when the race is made official for betting purposes. And that's kind of the simple answer.
All right.
Thanks, guys. That was a great answer.
Good job, Jim. Very, very, I think you kept things moving and got a lot of these questions answered. I think you also got us thinking. So when we do, click off, I'm sure all of us are going to come up with about 3 or 4 ideas how to make racing better and how to get more fans involved. So we got the conversation started. We had a nice round robin tonight, and I look forward to joining you guys again soon.
Yeah, thanks for the invite.
Likewise. No, pleasure, Julian. We'll have you again. I think this is your first time on Past the Wire. We'll definitely have you again. Everybody else here is pretty much regulars, but this was your first one, and we thank you for coming on. We appreciate you and your expertise.
Thank you.
It's not an easy road. I think we can agree on that. It's not an easy road, but enough of us love the game that I think it's worth the fight.
Yeah.
No, I think it's, in changing times, we have to get creative and we have to change with the times. And it doesn't matter what the sport would, things evolve.
Absolutely. All right. Anything else, or is that a wrap?
I think we exhausted ourselves and our viewers, right?
Yeah. These things have a tendency to go long. What are you going to do? Jim will break it up. I'm not worried. He's a pro. He's the best videographer in the business. So.
All right. Good.
All good. All right.
Thanks, everybody.
I'll stop the recording, and Jim, you can stay on with me for a minute. We'll wrap it up. But everybody, thanks for watching. If you made it through the whole show, good job. We appreciate it. And ciao for now.
Thanks
Thanks again, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.
Nobody does it better.
History remembers moments of extraordinary strength, skill, and determination. True greatness is forged by those who fulfill their